Welcome to the Crocker House Museum kitchen. This is a kitchen that would be pretty typical in the 1880s. The stove here would have used either wood or coal as its source of fuel. This is the burn box. If the burn box where you put your source of fuel, if it does not have a brick liner, it's a wood burner. A coal burning range needs that brick liner to protect the stove from cracking because coal burns that hot. So when you're starting your stove in the morning, you want to make sure that the oven is off. Yes, these old stoves, many of them had an on and off switch. And how it functions is turning it up turns the oven on. How that works is there's a space between the stove, the sides, the top, around the oven box, roughly about 3 inches thick. And by pulling this up, you pull up a flap that directs the air to go back around the wood box before going up the flue. So it's much like a convection oven. But I will tell you from experience, you rarely need to have your oven on. Maybe just shortly after getting your stove going, the stove's cool. But if you have that stove going all day, most likely you're not going to need that. And in fact, you might even have to cool your oven by having the door open for a while to let some of the heat out. How would you test your oven? Believe me, cooks learn very well, very quickly. Just putting your hand in and feeling the temperature, you could get an idea of what was a good baking temperature according to what you needed. Some ladies would put a fork or something to hold the door cracked open so it wasn't so hot. So definitely cooking was a lot different then, and you just learn by experience. And every stove has its own little quirks. So let me show you something else that's interesting about the stove. People referred to it as a range. Range meant your range of heat. Your high, medium, low. These are warmers. These are also warmers. If you wanted to get something really cooking fast, some people had these type of burners. Let's see if I can put a close up on it for you. This type of burner where you could take off a small section to get something to a rolling boil. Perhaps you need it to really boil, and you could take also another ring off. The only bummer about using this technique for cooking is that soot will form on the bottom of your pot. And of course, you're going to have to clean that. Cleaning the stove, they did once a week, typically on a Thursday. And you really had to take everything apart. You'd put paper on the table, you'd have a wire brush, you'd have to scrape everything off from inside. Some ovens had a little flap available, and you had a long tool that was bent at the end that was called a rake. So after you scraped all the soot that fell down below the oven box, you could scrape that out, or rake it out as they referred to it. And then you would have to use a polish and polish your whole stove. Things that were like this, chrome, you wanted to clean with just baking soda and water. So you had to clean the stove at least once a week, mainly to make sure nothing's flammable inside to keep it safe for cooking. We have some interesting things on the stove that I will talk about. This is a waffle iron. So you can cook both sides of the waffle. This here is a toaster. The heat goes on to the bread through the inside. So you would lay your pieces of bread up against the outside of the toaster, and you would have to turn your toast around so that the inside, the part that's facing inside, would become toasted. So to toast the other side, you'd have to flip it. So it took a little while to do. Some old timers actually just held a piece of toast over the stove, the hottest point, just held a piece of toast with a fork and did it that way. But this definitely was nice to have, and you could do 4 slices at once. So that's a little information about the stove, and to make you appreciate the electricity or gas that you have, because also every day you would have to empty the ash at the bottom. And what would they do with that? They typically throw it in the road. So I hope that was interesting for you, and now you have a whole new look of what life was like in the 1880s.